Welcome to part 3. Shit. So in the last section I was talking about what was happening at my last apartment flat that I lived in, and I don't recall whether I discussed some of the more unusual aspects, which are the lucid dreaming aspect of things, which I don't think a lot of ET experiencers talk about because it's not really regarded as solid proof of anything. So during the period both before and after I met my future wife, I was having dreams of seeing small 4-foot tall white beings, very similar to the ones that I saw in my mind's eye in my bedroom when I'd asked for a visitation. So I would regularly have dreams where I was in some unknown environment and interacting with these small beings. And shortly before I met my future wife, who I've now separated from, nothing to do with the ET interactions, I had a very intense dream of a sexual nature, about being with an ET that was reminiscent of, if you can imagine, a female Krishna. So a very light blue skin, with no hair, but generally fairly, well, from what I can remember, fairly Caucasian features, but very spiritual being, very aware spiritual being. And I had very erotic and intense sex that was certainly the most erotic experience that I've had, and I've had some erotic experiences in the flesh, I can assure you, but that was really intense. Many experiencers have these lucid dreams and wake, as I did, frequently in cold sweats and feeling as if they'd been deposited back from another reality. And I bring that up not because I'm suggesting that it is certainly a part of my UFO or ET experiences, but because it's such an unusual life to live, having these ET experiences, that you have to look into the possibility that any aspect of your life could be manifesting a reality, a manifestation of a reality that we don't yet understand. So there may be something of a real nature in the lucid dreams, i.e. not self-generated. So I'm open to that idea that it could be true. Incidentally, in conjunction with the fact that I've had a lucid, well, I only remember specifically one, although I did have a couple of others that were highly questionable, which I won't go into. But so I've had one dream where I had apparently sexual intercourse with an ET being. Then at another point I've also had, I also try and show it on the cam really, but it would be quite difficult to pick up, especially with that being on the tripod. But I have a rectangular piece of flesh missing from my left leg on the outside. And the feeling that I get from that is that I am part of a breeding program. That breeding program is, the feeling that I get about it is that it's a kind of ark project in case we manage to self-destruct, because the one thing that I'm aware of is the ET's interest in the military and their interest in things like nuclear power stations, and as well as the state of consciousness of the people on the planet and the ecology of the planet, because the standard experiences that ET experiencers remember, if they ever remember being on a craft, is they're shown a vision of a pristine earth with salmon leaping in rivers and trees waving in the breeze, eagles flying in the sky. Then they're shown the images of polluted rivers, bodies washed ashore, something like a mud covering the face of the earth, which some people have said could be the permafrost having melted through global warming. Who knows? But they're shown the wonderful image of the planet Earth as in its best state, the best state that it could be in, and then an Earth that's ravaged and pretty much destroyed, and the message is repeated time and time again: you're destroying the planet, you're destroying the planet. And most ET experiencers come out of their contact with a newly renewed belief in Gaia and the life of the independent life of the planet as an entity in itself, and the sacredness of all life as well as human life, and a desire to save the ecology of the planet. So I have a feeling that I'm part of an art project, or my DNA is. I even suspect, not suspect in a mind way, but I have a feeling that I may have hybrid offspring, which is a very current thing in ET experiencer circles. But that's just a feeling that I have. I don't have any direct experience of that. So I moved out of that flat that I was in, and I moved into this present location with my then wife, and all the experiences followed me here. I would frequently open the front door, and an orb would fly past just over the rooftops, over the level of the rooftops, at high speed or slowly. I discovered that this was a fantastic location to call orbs because I had a roof terrace, and covered the whole thing with lights around the fence, and it almost acted like a magnet for orbs to some extent. We started to sell off things that we didn't want, that weren't any good for the house, and buy things. So we went through a refinement period in terms of getting the house together, and during that period we took many photos around the house of different objects and discovered faces within orbs that we captured on film. Which is it's a difficult area. The small orbs on film is a difficult area, and certainly not accepted by everybody. But we did capture some very unusual photographs with mostly lion faces in them, or lion or cat being kind of faces, which a couple of years into living here, I actually went on the roof terrace and saw with my own eyes a semi-transparent orb that was floating from head height, so about 6 foot, 5'8", 6 foot from the roof terrace floor. And it floated slowly up into the air, and I caught it on video and have slowed it down, and if you look very carefully, the video is actually on my channel, you will see cat faces. So, interesting one. We have had cats, so whether it is that or whether it's some kind of ET cat connection, who knows? Or that's that kind of orb is more difficult to pin down in terms of whether it could be a spirit orb or something else, and certainly not as manifest and physically dynamic as the plasma orbs that I video. So I had a lot of experiences here and would regularly stay out on the roof terrace for hours and hours videoing orbs, and most of my orb videos are from this period where I constantly refined my equipment to the camera that I've got now, which is the Sony HDR CX900. Which is great because you can stabilize the you can get good stabilization for zooming in, and certainly with the digital zoom, which is a shame to use, but you really have to, you can get quite far out and see things a long way away. So for a while, my wife was interested in these experiences, and one evening we sat out on the roof terrace, and we had I still have them, some reclining chairs with soft cushions that almost go flat, and we sat out on those and reclined them, and I got up, called the orbs, and sat down again, and we waited, and within a couple of minutes an orb manifested just above rooftop level, so I would have said about 30 or 40 feet above our heads, and it was the size of a beach ball, or slightly bigger, and it had a 9 foot long plasma tail, so effectively it looks like a tadpole, a glowing tadpole made of plasma, incredibly bright, and it's one of the closest experiences I've ever had. Both of us were mind blown, and unfortunately I was unable to capture it on video because it happened so fast, and it manifested in thin air and disappeared into thin air. So the whole experience only lasted for a few seconds, and then it was gone. So I had that experience, and started to experience a lot of what I call shooting star orbs, which are orbs which appear suddenly at low altitude and appear like fireworks crossing the sky and then disappear suddenly after 1 or 2 seconds, sometimes less. And I had other experiences like orbs that would suddenly manifest in my field of vision and appear to drip plasma down to the ground, which that was one of the most impressive experiences I'd ever seen. Now during this period my marriage started to fail, and I fortunately had my ETs and orbs to distract me from the awful truth that my marriage was on the rocks. So I would go out regularly onto the roof terrace, sometimes till 4 in the morning, and see the most incredible things, including a flying pyramid which was lit up with multiple colours on the base, and then a separate set of colours halfway up, and then I could see the outline of the top. And that was a large craft. From what I could tell, it appeared to me to be about a few hundred meters away, and it only manifested in visibility for 6 or 7 seconds, and then it blinked out of existence. And that was astonishing. Now the other consistent thing that I've seen is something that you would see if you were looking at Sumerian tablets or inside Egyptian pyramids at some of the hieroglyphics, and that's winged discs. And also in the Persian Zoroastrian tradition of, I think it's called the Faravaha, a being inside a disc with wings. So I saw a winged disc, and the first time I saw it was in the garden at this house. It was night time, probably around 7:30, 8 o'clock, and a faintly glowing winged orb flew over my head at the height of just above the roof terrace. So it was the roof terrace is 6 feet above ground level if you're standing outside. And I saw it for about 7 or 8 seconds, and it was flying very slowly, and you could actually see what appeared to be little wings flapping like this, not at speed, quite slowly, like that. And I thought, what on earth is that? What is it? Now skip forward probably another 6 months, and I saw the same thing again in the same place, and I wasn't any the wiser because I had a very similar experience. A year later, I'm on the roof terrace and I see one of these things coming. And this time, because I saw it coming well in advance and the lighting conditions were better, so it was in the summer and it wasn't completely dark. And this time what I saw, which I believe to be the same type of entity, or even the same entity that I saw before, was a diaphanous, faintly glowing orb, which as it got closer I could see that there was something inside the orb. And I looked even more closely, I'm kind of really focused in on it, and I see that there is the thin shadow of a being inside the orb, a tiny little being. And then I'm looking at the action of this being flying, and I'm looking at the wings, and I realise they're not wings. I don't see wings. What I'm seeing is tiny little arms coming out of the orb, and they're just flapping like that. Just as, I don't know whether anyone out there's had dreams of flying and sometimes you have to flap your arms, but the impression was something like that. And again, this being was faintly glowing. I did actually draw it, this being, so I've got a drawing of it somewhere. I didn't think to get it to hand. But so that kind of blew my mind, and it made me think about the Zoroastrian tradition and the Sumerian traditions and the Egyptian traditions, and I thought, well, have these kind of beings manifested in the past before? And I thought, for sure they must have, because what I saw was so similar to those traditions. I could not think of any way that these independent, although linked traditions, could have just made this up as a symbol of various different things, you know, whether it be the sun or what have you. The actual being inside the orb was, well, I've seen it. And then I've seen something even more startling, in a way. I was standing on the roof terrace, not having any luck, calling orbs, nothing was appearing. And suddenly these two things are moving towards me at a quite significant speed, and they're blue oval shapes, so they're not, something strange is happening to my ears. I don't know whether this is significant. Wow. They're blue oval shapes, so they're not orbs, and there's an intense blue inside them. And inside these blue oval shapes is something that looks like a flame. It's a bright orange vertical plasma strand, if you like. That's what it resembled. And they looked like eyes that were, rather than, you know, if you imagine an eye like that, they were kind of tilted upwards. So these things fly past me directly overhead, not particularly high up, maybe 50 feet or so. And I've got my camera in my hand and I click record, and I'm thinking this is going to be some of the best footage ever seen of anything paranormal. And these things reminded me of the Eye of Saruman. No, not the Eye of the Eye of Sauron in Lord of the Rings. They were that intense, particularly the orange pupil type things that I could see. But they certainly looked like flying eyes. That's the only way I could describe them. And I excitedly came down with my camcorder and downloaded the video onto my computer, and the whole thing was blurred out. It was like there was interference on the camera. So I didn't get that footage, which was a big disappointment. Now, during this period, both Dee and I experienced different forms of paranormal experiences in the house. One of which was the regular sighting of a shadow being, which was roughly 6 foot tall, appeared to have a male shape, which would appear in the doorway just over here, and both Dee and I saw it on a regular basis, so we'd see it, you know, a couple of times a week probably. And it would just come into the doorway and then disappear, just as if it was checking to see what was going on. Then I also experienced going into the bathroom, and if my wife wasn't around, I'd just leave the door open and go for a pee. And the cat, Griff, always follows me everywhere, even into the toilet. And I was peeing, and suddenly this shadow being appears in the doorway, and I thought, bloody hell, can't I be left alone to have a pee? And it's there for about a second and a half, and as soon as I look round, Griff, the cat, also sensed something and looked round and would have just seen this shadow entity before it disappeared. My mother came to visit once, and she also saw this shadow entity at the top of the stairs by the bathroom door, so around the same kind of place. During this time we were also lying in bed sometimes, and both of us independently would feel somebody sitting on the bed. And usually shortly after that I would go to sleep, so I don't know whether there's a correlation with that or not. The other thing that would happen, usually in the morning, but once at night as well, is that both of us would experience our toes being wiggled. So somebody would grab, usually the big toe, it happened 2 or 3 times, and just wiggle like that, gently, like playfully. That confused me because I wasn't sure whether we were dealing with a spirit manifestation or an ET being. And it's doubly complicated to work out because during ET callings on the roof terrace, I've also experienced being absolutely sure that my hair's been stroked, and I've had my back and shoulders touched, which was quite a surprise. I wasn't expecting anything like that. So quite a variety of different kinds of paranormal experiences, including at one stage even my stepson, who lived on the top floor, heard somebody call his name and thought it was either myself or his mother, and I don't think the neighbours were even there at the moment. At that time, I think they were on holiday in Corfu or Greece, the place that they go to. So lots of different kinds of paranormal experiences going on. On another occasion, we're sitting on this sofa, and Dee has her mobile phone on the table, and it starts to ring, and we're just sitting watching a YouTube video or a TV program or something, I can't remember. And she picks up the phone and she says, "Oh my God, what is this?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, what is it?" She said, "There's a message here saying Russell Davies has just left you a business card." And the phone that had been used to ring the mobile was my landline. My landline phone, which is just up here. I hadn't touched it. I don't even know how to send a business card with a landline, and I'm not sure it's even possible. I don't even know what a business card is sent via, certainly, I've never owned a mobile phone actually. I'm virtually Amish, according to one of my friends. So an awful lot of paranormal experiences, and an awful lot of orb sightings. And during this period as well, I had an awful argument with my wife. And I left the house, and I went to visit my friend because I wanted to give her some space. And I decided to come back because I realised that my stepson was, he might want something to eat, or he might not be okay. He's an Aspie, and so I started to turn round and head back, and I'd only gone 2 paces, and one orb suddenly appeared in the sky above me, probably just above the rooftop level of the houses nearby. One appeared and shot upwards, and as it shot upwards, an orb from the side flew and intersected with it, and it formed a plasma cross in the sky that hung there for a couple of seconds. And I knew that that was a message for me not to go back. So I'd started to experience the ETs actually being interested in my welfare at this point as well. During this time I was witnessing orbs being chased by helicopters, only to disappear in plain sight and to reappear behind the helicopters. I also experienced, during an orb calling, I had an orb coming towards me, and I suddenly heard the sound of a jet which was flying quite low, and the orb blinked out of existence. It just went, and the jet, 5 seconds later, flew past where the orb had been, and within a few seconds of the jet passing at high speed and low altitude, 2 orbs reappeared where the single orb had been, and then started flying in the direction that the jet had just come from, so in the opposite direction of where the jet was now moving towards. I also have experienced, as have other people in Shrewsbury, including one of my friends who's an ex-journalist, incredible booming sounds late at night, and by late I mean between 2 and 4 in the morning, that resembles the sound of a cannon or artillery of some kind, anti-aircraft guns or something along those lines. And it's not, I checked with Stuart, I said, is it possible that it was a car that backfired and the sound was carried along the river? And he's an ex-motoring journalist, and he said that wasn't a car, Russell. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a car. The impression that I get, taking into account how I've been followed by the military and had various encounters with people shining lights at me, which has also happened here with the same person that I encountered in the park 2 years previously, that had the same strange gait, the same strange lanky movement of the guy that was shining lights at me in the park 2 years before I moved here. So I've had all of this experience of being monitored, and the military being interested in me as an ET experiencer and what I'm doing, and I've witnessed the orbs being followed, and the impression that I get sometimes is there might be some kind of confrontations going on that we're not aware of, that might even be in other dimensions. I think it's a possibility. Because while I do not believe for a moment that, as Stephen Greer suggests, the military are performing the majority of what he would term alien abductions. I mean, I do not believe the military can walk through walls. Lost my train of thought now. I think there is an awful lot of military interest in the ET presence. I recently came across references to a paper, some of which I've now read, by the Ministry of Defence. And it was a project looking into plasma orbs. and plasma orbs were regarded at the time that the UFO desk existed as being of great military significance, and that's stated in the original released Ministry of Defence files from the UFO desk. You can read it online. So they have an interest in plasma orbs, and the military do not think they're Chinese lanterns, nor do they think that it's misidentified satellites or the ISS. And interestingly, there was a lot of talk in this paper about the potential of human damage through even interaction hundreds of yards away with plasma orbs. So they were more or less saying if you were 150 yards away from a plasma orb, you could potentially suffer serious physical harm, which made me wonder about the fact that I had a stroke, a mini stroke, about 2 years after starting to be able to call orbs. And the closest I've been, and it's been on many occasions, has been around 40 to 50 feet away at ground level, but many times many times within 100 yards. So it has led me to wonder whether that's been a factor in my having had a stroke, and also to some extent it answers why I don't get frequent close orb sightings. So there's that, which leads me to my most significant of probably all my sightings, or all my experiences, and it was recently, about 10 weeks ago, 11 weeks ago.